Okay, here we go. I don't know how many times I've tried this. Tried to use my phone as a camera, and I was using photo booth, and after recorded 30 minutes, and then it saved a corrupted file, which I tried to restore, and I was only able to get 16 minutes of it back. So I'm trying this again. So here we go. Um, Stranger Things, flashbacks, autobiographical memory, nostalgia. Those are some of the things I wanted to talk about and did talk about this morning. So we'll see if I can revisit them. And I guess one of the things I'd like to try to do while describing some of the things in Stranger Things specifically is to try to visualize them. I say that because my ability to visualize is still 0 to very, very, very poor. So, but I do want to try to remember them in more than just words. All right, so there are different things that are like epiphanies for people that have aphantasia and then learn about visualization and mental imagery. And I mean, I guess the largest, which is the most obvious one, is that it exists and that there's a whole different way of thinking and remembering. And I guess I don't just guess, it's vice versa as well. People who can visualize, and especially those with hyperphantasia and very strong mental imagery, um, it's surprising or even unbelievable that there are people who have like no playing in their mind or multiple channels or things like that. Um, but I just wanted to focus on one of those things that occurred to me recently while rewatching the first season of Stranger Things. With the new season that came out, I was interested in seeing it. My two kids had never watched it, and um, so I started watching a few episodes with them. For my son, it was a bit too scary, even though he's seen other things that I would say are much more intense or scary. Um, I think he actually has high imagination, high visualization abilities for various reasons, but also like going to bed, he has had, when he's sleeping by himself, some fears of like things that he's seen during the day. So I'm curious about that, but my kids have been like tired of me asking them about their world, and so they just automatically don't share much of anything. Um, but back to Stranger Things, I had seen it originally back when it came out around 2015 or 2016, somewhere around there, that time. And so now it's like instead of just watching a recap, I decided let me just watch it. And my kids had never seen it, so I started watching it and just finished the first season um, last night. And from the very beginning, I started not only watching it differently as, focusing on like looking at things in a different way, but I noticed immediately their use of this storytelling device called flashbacks. I've tried to make this video enough times that I have this word flashback and storytelling device strongly in my mind, but you can call it whatever you want. It's just when watching the show, I noticed that this using flashbacks, was more than just a way to show the viewer what happened in the past, because that's all in the old quote unquote old me, like more than a year ago. I didn't realize what was happening. I didn't realize it was more than just like, oh, we're getting to see what happened in the past and why the character is this way. And sometimes there would be like kind of jarring. Like, where are we going? Is this the past? Is this the present? Like, is this the what? I thought this person was lost. How is he, back? Like Will Byers when he's talking to his brother Jonathan in their room, in his room, I guess Jonathan's room. It's like, wait, I thought he was gone. Or, you're in Fort Byers with Will, and it's like, oh, I thought he disappeared. How did he get? He was in Upside Down. And it's like, oh, okay, I understand there. This is a past scene. Um, Watching it now, 10 years later, I don't remember much. I didn't remember much from the show when I was watching it, but it was easier for me to tell like what was happening because I now understand how flashbacks and memory, autobiographical memory and reliving experiences work. So I could notice the cues, the visual cues that would occur. And I understood like the experience of like reliving in a visual way, in a mental image, like something that you've done before, which I, never had the ability to do. And I mean, I'm starting to gain the ability, but um, it's new for me. And so the main thing is that you come to a point where you realize, like, oh, I didn't know that people did this. I didn't know that this is how most people's brains work, how their experience in life is. And it feels very profound. Mm. So, to give an example, because I'm kind of rambling, the first time was better. There's a scene at the very beginning, like one of the first flashbacks is when Eleven is exploring um, Mike's house, and she makes her way upstairs and she plays around with the lazy boy and then makes her way to the television set and somehow accidentally turns it on and is surprised and mesmerized by it, and she's flipping the channels, and then there's a commercial. She switches to a channel where there's a Coca-Cola commercial. um, just as a quick side note, there's definitely some Coca-Cola product placement going on in this movie, and it's probably over a decade and a half when I first realized like what product placement was. It's this case is pretty subtle, but it's there. You see Coca-Cola cans here and there. But she turns on this commercial by accident, and it takes her in her mind back to when she was in the research facility, and she is being made to use her abilities, use her powers to try to, through telekinesis, crush this can of Coca-Cola, this empty can. And in the past, like I described earlier, I would have just thought, well, oh wow, this is just happening. This is where she came from. Cool. But now I understand it as there's a visual cue that seeing the Coca-Cola can triggers a memory in which she is perhaps seeing and hearing everything that we are then presented with. So maybe she sees in her mind's eye, the research room that she was in, and she remembers perhaps through her body, like the tenseness of like, oh, I need to perform well on this test. I need to make Papa happy. And, seeing the can like crush um, through the use of her power. And then she comes back to out of that vision, if you want to call it that, out of that visualization. And then she's back in the normal present time, her paying attention to her surroundings again. But that ability to relive past experiences is, those flashbacks are more than just the writer and the directors and whoever using it to show us what happened in the past. But it's also a way for us to see inside the mind of the characters and understand what they're carrying with them. And that was something I didn't know before. And it became clear to me. I started noticing more and more how often this storytelling device is used. Um, a second example of that is also early on in the first season, where Jonathan is driving to his dad's to see if Will is there, because Will is missing, and they're, frantic trying to find him. And even though he hates his dad, he's going to go there and see if his little brother's there. And while he's driving on the way, on the radio is playing that song, Should I Stay or Should I Go? I don't know what the real title is, but I remember hearing it actually myself. I remember the fact that I heard it as a kid, and I remember the song tune and lyrics. It was familiar. So as he hears it on the radio, it takes him back. And I'm using that term, takes him back, to imply like reliving an experience in your mind. It takes him back to this memory in which he's in his room with his brother and they're listening to music, and he's trying, he's imparting his big brotherly wisdom of, do you like this music? You don't have to like it, like what you like, be yourself, essentially. Like, don't be influenced what others think. Don't try to just listen to stuff just because it's cool. But they're listening to this music, and the parents start fighting in the background, and they turn up the music, and they're just like getting away and escaping from the chaos of that house. And it's such a tender, beautiful moment between brothers. And imagine, like, conceptually imagine to all those aphants listening to this and watching this, you are able to like relive and see your brother and hear his voice and hear your voice and hear the music and re-feel and re-experience that. And perhaps now your heart is being torn because now your little brother is missing, and you want to get to your dad's house as fast as possible, but you're also scared of dealing with him. And um, you're not sure if he's alive, and so you have this heartfelt, moving memory that you relive, and it's just triggered or queued up by this one song. Again, this is something that at least and I'm sure many people with aphantasia and deficient autobiographic memory don't experience. And so it's a two-edged sword, right? It's wonderful because we don't have to relive traumatic experiences. But it's also sad in that we don't get to relive joyful experiences as much, or we can't remember our childhood, or we can't remember, our wedding day, or things like that. And cases are much more severe than others. And so, um, yeah, it's an experience that until you understand that it exists, you just aren't aware of what's actually happening, like in the show. Like, you just think, oh, it's a segue. There's the song playing and it played in the past. You don't necessarily connect with, like, oh, because of the song, he's remembering and it triggers in his mind, and he's actually seeing these things, the same things that we are seeing in his past. He's seeing these things, he's feeling them, and he's remembering them. He is like actually seeing and remembering it and thinking about it. And when you don't have the ability to do that, when you don't have the ability to reminisce and relive past experiences in a sensory way, like, you don't get that it's a thing, and you don't understand that this is actually what's happening in the scene. And perhaps the third, and most, in the first season at least, the third and most profound example of a flashback is surrounding Hopper and the loss of his daughter, which I'll put spoiler something here. I forgot this in the first video too. Um, I'll put it in the description and maybe in the title, but if you've never watched Stranger Things before, any of it, and not the first season, this is a spoiler. But Hopper has at least three times in which he remembers, and there are flashbacks to um, his daughter and scenes with, especially when she was sick. Towards the end, I think that's probably when they mostly come up. And for example, like when Joyce and Hopper are in the Upside Down for the first time, she's having trouble breathing and she's like starting to have very shallow breath. She's getting very nervous and scared. And Hopper has to like comfort her and say, okay, calm, I need you to calm down. Like just breathe in and breathe out and, breathe in and breathe out. And just him doing that and those words, having to console and help someone like breathe, takes him back to when he had to do this with his daughter, perhaps one of the first times in which she's having severe symptoms from, this condition, which is perhaps unknown in that time and space. And so where we see his daughter, he's there with his wife, I assume, and they're in like a playground setting somewhere and or some public setting, and he's trying to not console, but like help her through this physical symptom that she's having, and he's helping her breathe. Um, and you can tell in the moment by that they're in the Upside Down that he's actually having an experience in which he is reliving this. It's not just a segue that the director and the writers are using to like allow us to have another look and revealing the past. Is actually these characters are having flashbacks. And you can see it on their facial expressions, which I've been paying more attention to, and in their body, and that they're kind of shaken by like, oh, like they're coming back to reality, or it hits them hard. Um, sometimes on certain flashbacks, they'll be kind of staring into space, and then they'll refocus and be like, okay, like waking up from a daydream. There's another instance in which um, the latest instance, I think, in season one is that they've got Will now. They're still in the Upside Down, but he's not breathing, and his heart's not beating. He's not breathing, and they try to resuscitate him. So they're doing CPR. Hopper is instructing Joyce on how to breathe, and he's doing the chest compressions. And it takes him back to being in the hospital and seeing his daughter. Like he just holding his wife, standing back and watching his daughter basically die in front of him. And the hospital staff are trying to like resuscitate and bring her back, but then eventually she just dies. And then he's just sitting in the stairwell in the corner, like just curled up in a ball and just like sobbing and crying. So can you imagine, like, you're trying to save this boy's life, Will Byers, and like then you start remembering like your own child's death? Incredibly emotionally difficult, but perhaps also very motivating, and like, I'm not going to let this happen the way it happened to my daughter. Like, I need to save this child. It's like he is, seeing in Will Byers like his dying daughter, and this is his chance to like do something he couldn't do in the past. And so it's a very poignant moment. It becomes even more poignant when you realize that these flashbacks are things that these characters are experiencing as if they were real. Their mind, and their body doesn't necessarily know that it's not. I mean, it knows it's not going to have the full response as if it were actually happening, but it does. There is a physiological response to mental imagery, and that's how they actually test for it. For those that don't know, like one of the ways they test is like they'll tell people to like imagine a bright light, and then depending on how much their eyes dilate, um, not or maybe it's the reverse, but while recording this, my words aren't working, but constrict, yeah, they don't dilate. Depending on how much their eyes constrict, um, then perhaps the mental imagery is that much stronger. Or to look at a scary image and then like imagine an image and like, do you start sweating? Like how much moisture is there on your skin? Um, because there is a physiological response to mental imagery. You can think about food and start salivating, right? Thinking about the taste, thinking about what it looks like, imagining it, visualizing it. Um, Again, I know that this theoretically, and I've made myself salivate by thinking about food, but I'm not seeing necessarily a strong image or any image of it. There's not any strong form or color or structure. It's probably like a zero point 0.5 on the VVIQ. But there is a strong response in these characters and these segues into the past based on these visual cues, these auditory cues. Um, they are, what was I saying? They are real. They feel real, and they can happen all the time. They can be very spontaneous, and that's one thing people often define visualization or aphantasia as the ability or the inability to voluntarily visualize. But many times visualization is not voluntary. And I think I talked about this in my previous video. Many times it is unbidden, spontaneous, intrusive, and they may be of very traumatic things. And people may wish to stop the images from coming up, but they are, unable to, or it just keeps coming up. And it's a wonderful, well, I was going to say it's a wonderful storytelling technique that takes us into the minds and hearts of the characters. It allows the writers and directors and storytellers to gradually reveal points in a very compelling way. Um, and I know I'm repeating myself here, but before learning about aphantasia and understanding how memories work, how autobiographical memories often work, like I had no idea that was actually what's happening in the show. I'm going to pause for a second here and then switch to talking about nostalgia, and then I think I'm going to wrap this up. But I will say, if this is a new thing for you, if you didn't realize this was what is happening in Stranger Things or other shows or movies with flashbacks and how the mind's eye and visualization is portrayed in movies, like if this is new to you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Please share your experience. Uh, Maybe this will help people in regards to learning something new, but also learning how to remember their own past as they work on developing mental imagery and visualization. Once you understand how it happens naturally without people trying, you can attempt to do it intentionally using cues, visual, auditory cues to remind yourself of the past in a sensory way. And then the idea is that more you do it, then it'll start just happening automatically and very quickly. And I've experienced some of that. I haven't been doing as much work on that as I should recently, but it's similar to pattern recognition. And I think it's linked to pareidolia, where one thing, one image, one sight, something that you see reminds you of something else. Um, And I've experienced that and have been able to access memories that are like over 20 years old of things that I had, toys, like I mentioned in my previous video, that I had no idea that like I haven't thought about that thing or that person for over 20 years. And I just thought that I don't know, I just thought that it wasn't there, that my memory was very meager. And it is, but it's like, oh, there's a lot there. It's just about learning how to access it. So nostalgia. Um, One thing about Stranger Things that's really cool is that it brings up 80s nostalgia for many people. And that's definitely not on accident. There's a reason why marketers are creating products in the form of movies and toys and shows that are based on things from, 20, 30 years ago. And that's the generation that is middle aged now and has a lot of what's the word, money that they can spend on different things, like income that I know there's a term for it, it's not coming to my mind. um Disposable, I guess, is what they call it, disposable income. So what they're doing is playing on familiarity, nostalgia, and other things to get people to buy things and pay for things that remind them of their childhood. Or yeah, that's how they know they'll be popular and be successful. And this has been seen in like the Marvel comic heroes and remaking of many movies from the past, and having the technology to do it bigger and better. Star Wars, Star Trek, all the different sci-fi things and beyond. Toy Story. Um, yeah, so nostalgia is big and it sells. And Stranger Things was is heavy on that. From the synth music, the grainy film look in the opening, text fading in with that red glow. Um, they definitely did a really good job with that. And I would say for me, and perhaps many others who have had aphantasia, that nostalgia, while it exists, while it exists, it is not as strong in us, or we don't experience it as strongly as those with regular to like hyper visualization abilities and mental imagery. Again, I'm making a distinction between visualization and mental imagery. They can both be used different ways, but there's the like seeing things like the color, the shape, the structure, and then there's other types of imagery such as that involve other senses like the smell, the sound, the taste, how it felt, like tactile, the texture. So yeah, I have felt nostalgia more when accessing things from the past, or reliving, if you will, things from the past by thinking about them in a sensory way, thinking about like my childhood, like one of my childhood homes, or toys that I've had, or um, pictures of me and my sister. In the past, like that wouldn't really strike any emotional chords or bring too much up. But now that I'm able to, like, looking at those photos wouldn't strike much up. But now when I think about them and like not just seeing it, but kind of reliving it internally in a subtle and soft way, it can still evoke pretty strong feelings of nostalgia and longing. Um, as I mentioned in my previous video, I recently explained to my son like the definition of bittersweet, and that's what nostalgia can be like. At least for me, that's what it's been like. It can be this bitter, two-edged sword, this bitter side in which it's like, oh, I miss that. I'm sad that I can't be in that time or with that person. But it can also be like heartwarming to just think about like, oh, that was really good. And so nostalgia becomes like a mixed emotion or a mix of emotions. And I'm curious, how people with strong visualization and strong like autobiographical memory, I'm curious how they feel when they see movies and they see things like, oh, there's a Twister or Dungeons and Dragons or these old radios. And, you know, the price of, you know, a pack of cigarettes or whatever it is, and it's like the prices were so low. Like, what's the sense of nostalgia that people are having? Like, is it impacting them? Are they feeling it, like these strong emotions towards it? Um, so yeah, that's the other thing that I guess I just wanted to mention is that nostalgia is used very much in this show, Stranger Things, and by the movie industry and cinema in general, by in so many ways, for better or for worse. And that one of the benefits of having aphantasia is that there's not really, it's very easy to let go of the past. It's not just very easy, it's like you're not even having to let go of the past because it's nothing you ever held on to in the first place. Like you're not like having this memory come up and you need to let go of it. The just memory's just not ever accessed. It doesn't come up. Maybe it's not even ever stored. Um, and maybe it is, and you just again you don't know how to access it. Your mind doesn't know how to access it. So um, yeah, I think that's everything for now. Hopefully this video will save, and maybe in the future I'll get a camera that I can hook up to here and get a better camera. But feel free to share any thoughts that you have. If you've had any other epiphanies related to what life is like, what experiences people with normal mental imagery and memory get to have that perhaps you've never had or you're just only starting to experience.